So how come it only took 8 hours to get to the hospital?
Well, we developed a history with the different politicians, and one of the politicians that we developed a bit of a history about was W.A.C. Bennett. And if you study your history, you'll know that at that time he was the Premier of the province of British Columbia. I had met Premier Bennett on a couple of occasions, but I got to tell you a funny story that I was invited to a dinner in Kamloops, the Canadian Inn at that time, and the Premier was going to be there. And after the dinner was over, I would do the same thing. I'd go and politic him about getting a hospital and things like that for Clearwater. And we were leaving the Canadian Inn, and he said to his security, "It's okay, it's John Harwood, he's just talking to me." And so I said, "Premier Bennett, what am I going to tell the people when I get back and you haven't committed to a hospital?" And he said, "Just tell them I smiled and smiled and smiled." And that was the kind of political attitude that was forthcoming at that time. So after the tape recording was played in Victoria, it of course became extremely embarrassing for the government. It makes it to CBC, the front pages of all the newspapers, and that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for services to people, but sometimes you use the media as much as they use you when they want to for different things. And so the government phoned W.A.C. Bennett, who was in Paris at the time, on a conference, and they said, "We have this problem in Clearwater, what are we going to do?" And he said, "Build them a hospital," and that was the decision. So even though when you develop a hospital and things like that, you write what's called a functional program, in other words, how many people are going to use it, what does the clientele look like, when the political will is there, a lot of those things don't exist anymore. It becomes, did you have enough pressure to get what you wanted to get? And that's very often how we have to achieve things, is to try and create a pressure to get people to give you what we believe was the correct thing. It's interesting, one of the things we had put in our functional program was we had very few statistics on Clearwater about sales and people and things like that. We weren't incorporated or anything like that. So one of the driving forces was the amount of liquor that was sold in Clearwater at that time was astronomical. So they obviously knew there was a big population here.
No kidding.
All right, how many doctors, when the hospital first came, did you guys manage to have?
We just had two at that time. Dr. Vergeer had left, and a doctor by the name of Bruce Anderson came, and then we attracted a couple of other doctors. But I should go to a sidebar. One of my other jobs at that time, of course, was trying to get doctors to come to Clearwater, and that wasn't our job to recruit, but I would interview the doctors. So we had lost Dr. Vergeer, and we had a doctor supposedly come into Clearwater by the name of Dr. Von Ropa. So what we would do is, this committee that I had with the health nurse on it as well, we would try and check their credentials. Well, when Dr. Von Ropa came to Clearwater, he set up in the Wellsbury Hotel, and he rented a room there. And of course we said, "Well, we'd like to see your certificates." He said, "Well, they're on their way." Dr. Von Ropa turned out to be a quack. In other words, he never was a doctor. But he set up practice in the basement of the hotel here. He lasted about 10 days. And we became quite suspicious of some of the things he was doing or saying. Some people thought he was the best doctor we ever had, but that's up to them. And when we went to challenge him about it one night after a board meeting that we had, he had already left town. He left town and left us a box of rubber gloves and a box of books, and that was it. Dr. Von Ropa was finally arrested in Seattle for posing as a dentist. So you run into all kinds of issues. So then the next time we have this doctor phones me and says, "We'll meet at the Wellsbury Hotel." So I give him a description of what I look like, and so we would meet in the hotel. And this young fellow came in and looked like a 16-year-old student, and I had just gone through the Dr. Von Ropa thing, and I said, "Until you show me your credentials now, you're not moving into this town." And it turned out to be Bruce Anderson, who was a doctor here for many, many years, then went to intermediate practice. But we only had two originally doctors here to start with.
So that was prior to having the hospital?
And then we built the hospital, and that took us until 1971 when we officially opened what's now the old hospital that you see still on the site there.
And was there just two doctors then too? Or?
There was just two doctors then. We gradually built the practice up to 5, or they did. At that time, doctors were not the responsibility of committees to recruit. Doctors recruited doctors, right? And then they established a medical practice,
right,
which is not common today.
Right, because Medicare kicked in what year again? That was prior to that?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it was
Yeah.
prior to that. And of course, to practice medicine in this province, you need a number by the government. And without that number, you can't bill the government. And one of the issues we've gone through in the last few years was trying to recruit doctors and get them to come to BC because of, you've all heard of it, the doctor shortage. So one of the places that the doctor shortage originated was in 1989. They hired a consultant group to write a pamphlet on doctors and the billings, that they could see that Medicare was getting out of line. And one of the recommendations was at that time that they limit the number of doctors that they would allow to practice, thereby limiting the cost of Medicare in the province. And so they shut down some of the medical schools and only allowed 40 or 50 students per year to fill. And of course, we know that we need about 200 doctors a year just to take up for the retirements and going into practice in this province. So when somebody writes papers like that in government, you have to look at the long-term effects, not just the short-term effects. And the long-term effects have been quite drastic as far as medical care is concerned.
And also the increase in population. I don't know if
Yes.
that was factored in.
Well, and of course now the other part is the demographics, and this is what Clearwater is changing from. When I came to Clearwater, it was a young person's community, a lot of children, a lot of people were working, they were all young, working in the bush and the mills. Now we've turned to an aged community because all those people have grown up here, had their children. The children have by and large left the town because there's nothing here for them to stay. And so we have an aging population in a lot of our rural communities.